What's going on, people? Hope everybody's well. Welcome back to the Onyx Report, where black male justice advocates uplift black men and boys using critical analysis. So, hope y'all are all doing well. As for me, oh man, I'm struggling. I've been sick in bed for the last 2 days. I have not slept though. I got the cold from hell. So I had to do this show today though, even though I could not breathe and I'm still struggling on it. So it's a rough week. Tomorrow's my last class of the semester. So I had to get it together, even though I am not feeling it. But I do appreciate those of you that came out to support. Shout out to y'all. I think this will be a special show. I hope you guys will enjoy it, get something out of it. Shout out to Mark. Appreciate the words as usual. Brother always lays it down. Andre, what's going on? Barry, as usual, I appreciate the support. Thank you for that. Let's see. Got AB in the house. What's going on? Yami. Donnie, what's happening? Got Prince in the house. Pardon, what's going on? Sam, over there on LinkedIn. What's good? What's good with you, Sam? Layman's Journal. As usual, y'all keep up with Layman's Journal. He's doing some good work over there. Also, make sure you get on his Patreon. So when he does an in-depth film review, you are right there. So make sure you support the brother. Shout out to Black Nerd. What's going on? Good to hear. All right. Got James in here. Let's see. Jason. Malika, what's going on, man? Shout out to you. Spain Man, what's going on? Michael. Let's see. Ghetto user in the house. Jay Kenyatta. What's up? Yeah, I had some technical issues, but just like 2 seconds before I hit the live button, so I'm hoping it's not messing with y'all. So shout out to that. Let me see. On the clock, what's good? I don't know how to pronounce that. Keys. Got Triple S 506. Yeah, man. So I'm glad everybody came through. We're gonna get into a few things tonight, even though I am out of it, man. I'm hoping I can catch up on some sleep sometime soon, because y'all don't understand. This last few days has been it got so bad, man. I was on my front lawn at 3 a.m. trying to breathe, and it was rough. So anyway, holler at your boys, support them if you can, because I'm going through it today or this last couple days. Like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel so we can continue to bring you this independent black male thought. So, please make sure you do that. And if you can't send anything to support, at least hit the like button, because we know YouTube is being real extra. So, aside from sickness, I had another collectible came in today, but because of the tariffs, they literally brought it to my front door and said that I had to have a cashier's check in hand from the bank in order for them to give it to me. And I didn't know that, so they literally had to take it away and they're going to bring it back later. Dude is holding my package, and I paid online right in front of him, and he still couldn't verify it. So he said he had to bring it back later. So I'm a little pissed because I wanted to show y'all the next thing. But next time. Shout out to Samuel. Appreciate that support. Glad you made the live as well. But anyway, y'all know I've been really talking about this concept lately that has piqued my interest. I've been talking a lot about feminization, and I think it's important that we talk about feminization. I'm going to put the info up just so you remember. You can donate Patreon, Cash App, PayPal, or right here through YouTube. And if you join the Patreon, you can support the Institute for Black Male Studies, which I am in the process of transferring to Patreon. And you can support the channel right here on YouTube, or both, so make sure you become a member as we do our live film reviews on the 1st and 15th at Patreon. You can come on up and chop it up directly as we break down films. So I think you'll enjoy that. On the 15th, we'll be doing strictly business. So come on through. Appreciate that on the clock. So anyway, I've been dealing with feminization because I think it really answers a lot of questions that I've been grappling with for years, even before I knew consciously that I was grappling with them. So I did a show a couple shows ago on Helen Andrews, conservative, white woman who really introduced the concept. And even though we all experience it or have been experiencing it, she kind of laid it on the table, which really allowed us to take the conversation in a different direction. And I appreciate that, because it's opened up some doors. And we're going to get into some of that tonight and look at some variations on it. But to show you how widespread this is, just real quick before I move further with the show, I want y'all to see just how this thing is hitting me. Let's see. Here we go. All right. So, y'all know the last few days, if I'm not able to sleep, I'm literally just up watching movies, trying to distract myself from having to grapple with this cold, boy. So I'm watching a bunch of random stuff. And as usual, I'm seeing the same stuff I've been criticizing for years now. But via feminization, it's interesting to see how media is using various different mediums to, kind of socialize us into accepting these ideas of female superiority. So I was watching this. This is the first one. And I'm gonna show you two more. And I'm gonna show you how random it's been lately. Shout out to Gregory and John. Appreciate that support. I was watching Troll 2. This was on Netflix. And this is an interesting series. The first one was pretty good. And the second one was interesting. But in this one, this is Norway, I believe it was, when they actually have trolls that wake up and walk around. And the interesting thing about it is, even in a weird film like this, they still are playing the same game, right? The women are intelligent, they're brilliant, they're running facilities, they're scientists. The men, you got two types of men represented here. You got one soldier, or you got the soldier who's hyper masculine but not that bright, and then you got the soy boy beta, who's a super fan of all the incredibly powerful, independent, strong women, and he's happy to play the background. Those are the two dominant males, the archetypes that you see in this film series. So I'm sitting here watching this, and I've been kicking around this concept. And again, I've been talking about this stuff for years, but it's interesting to kind of see it from a different light. So even in the stuff that I'm casually watching that I'm not thinking has anything to do with anything, we're still seeing it, right? The super chick dynamic, and you can kind of see her back in the middle of that. She's the star of the movie, and she was the star of the first one, but they really pushed this dynamic to the edge, right? The super brilliant scientist chick and the dumb idiot men that are following her around looking for answers. And this has become so prevalent in the last 20 years that it's no wonder that you have a whole generation of young men that really don't appreciate masculinity at all. So that was the first one. The second one, when my son came home for the little break last week, we were watching just a bunch of random shit. And we messed around and watched the Hangover trilogy. He never saw it. And we were just looking for something to laugh at, So we were watching this. Shout out to Barry. Appreciate that. So we pulled up Hangover. Now, I'm only going with this one just because it was the last one I watched, but it applies to all three. And this isn't a recent film. These are older, but they're hilarious. So we were just watching some dumb stuff to just take our minds off stuff and relax. But I'm noticing even in this, the women are fairly rational. They're sane. They're composed, and the men are just idiots. You know what I mean? And as funny as it can be, when you step back and you look at it from a larger frame, you start to see, the various kind of social engineering practices that are going on and have been going on in our media for some decades now. And I'm only showing you these three things, not to say that they're the pinnacle of these ideas, but just to show you how widespread it is, the breadth of it, that it can it's so many random things that you can take in and consume, and they have the same ideas over and over. Men are idiots, men are incapable, men are not bright, and you really need female oversight to be able to contribute, right? And the last one was Landman. And I just put this one up because it was the last thing I watched. And so if you know anything about Landman, the woman on the left is just way out of pocket. You know what I mean? Way out of pocket, dominating her husband, played by Billy Bob Thornton, yelling at people, throwing dishes, just real extreme. And they got another situation going on where a young man drills an oil well, becomes a millionaire, tells his young wife that they are now rich, and she breaks up with him and kicks him out the house. And then later on, she kind of takes him back, but before she does, she tells him that he messed up because he left when she kicked him out. So you just have these moments and these random projects where these women are just running men left and right in these all kind of just ridiculous ways, and it's acceptable. It's become normalized. We expect it in many respects. And so, this idea about socialization then is something that I want us to delve into. And one of the ways we're going to do that tonight is I have 3 guests, and they're going to come up one at a time. Now, I have asked them to conceal their identities because they are going to talk to us about some real life situations. Now, this is probably not going to be different from what some of you have experienced. But these are 3 men that just in the last week, and I mean in the last week, their situations have come up, right? So I'm again, much like the films I just showed you, I just grabbed these 3 brothers, not because they're the only ones this is happening with. They're just 3 that ran across my desk in the last week. I wanted to give them an opportunity to share with you their stories about how feminization has affected them, mostly in the workplace. Some of them can speak to one special situation, one extreme situation. Some of them can speak to you about really their whole careers. But like I said, this is probably reflective of what many of you are already grappling with. But I want us to get it on the record. I want us to talk about where feminization has kind of brought us, especially as it relates to Black men, and how we navigate the work experience, right? So I'm going to keep each one. I'm going to cap it at about 20 minutes. I'm going to let them talk. I may ask some clarifying questions here and there, but for the most part, I just want them to share their experiences with you about what they've been going through in the workplace. Now, I'm not going to give any names. I've asked them to turn their cameras off, and we're just going to hear their voices because I've had guests on my show, and I've had brothers come through and had to call me later and ask me to take their name off. Why? Because they were going up for jobs and they were being denied because people didn't like what they said. You know what I mean? And I don't want any of that to happen to anybody who I'm trying to support. But I do, and they agree with me for the most part. They want their story told. They just don't want anybody to have to suffer, and neither do I. I definitely don't want anybody to suffer on my platform for sharing their stories. But I think it's important that we get the word out. So again, no names, no images. We just gonna let them talk, tell you about their stories. There's gonna be 3. Now, before I bring the first one up, this is the last thing I'm gonna show you before I bring them up. Now, this is a quote by Helen Andrews that I think gives a little context to what we're gonna be doing, right? And this is from her piece, the article that she did. I want to say, October 16th. It's called "The Great Feminization." And one of the quotes from her in this, there are a few that are on point. But this one says, "A feminized legal system might resemble the Title IX courts for sexual assault on college campuses established in 2011 under Obama. These proceedings were governed by written rules and so technically could be said to operate under the rule of law. But they lacked many of the safeguards that our legal system holds sacred, such as the right to confront your accuser, the right to know what crime you're accused of, and the fundamental concept that guilt should depend on objective circumstances knowable by both parties, not in how one party feels about an act in retrospect. These protections were abolished because the people who made these rules sympathized with the accusers, who were mostly women, and not with the accused, who were mostly men." What we're gonna bear witness to tonight are 3 different brothers who have gone through some things that reflect what Andrews is talking about right here. So let me go ahead and bring up the first gentleman. All right. Can you hear me, sir? Hello.
Is that me?
Yes, you. All right.
Okay.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
All right. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your recent situation?
Um, it's been going on since second week of September. So I was simply helping a female coworker with her job.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working in education for the last 22 years. I've been working with all brands of students. I've never had any issue, any complaint. I am a full-on steward of educational facilitation. So I was just simply helping a coworker with a program that kind of resonated with disciplining of students to see which students had, had some behaviors and things of that nature. And the individual was of a larger size,
Mm.
a plus size woman, was sitting at a elevated, those standing desks. So she's
Hmm.
sitting at a stool. So her body position is a bit higher than, in a regular chair. And I just simply went around on her right side, reached over her to avoid body contact. And next thing I know, 2 days later, I'm accused of putting my genitalia on her hip. And mind you, every day in my pocket, I carry a phone, keys, and wallet, which are, somewhat near my waistline, belt line. But I was there with this individual for no more than 5 minutes, just showed her, and then I had to get back because I had to supervise other students. 2 days later, I'm sent home. No one can tell me what I've done. No one can identify what my charges are. I don't know who my accuser is.
Mm.
I'm just placed at home for almost 3 weeks
Mm.
without knowing what charges, what allegations, what accusations have been bestowed on me. And I have a great memory, so I'm thinking back. I'm like, I've done nothing of any egregious act. And then when it came 3 weeks later, it was found that, I put my genitalia on a woman's hip. And I'm like, are you serious? Then the statement said that because of this incident, I am not apt or eligible to work with female students in the future, when that is completely false. When I've worked with female students for my entire educational campaign.
Mm.
So not only was I sent home, the other individual was able to stay at the school to corroborate, construct a story, get sympathy. There was a private investigator who kind of working on behalf of the school, kind of, framed an entire report to me that I was just putting my genitalia on people's shoulders, which is physically impossible based on my height and my physical disposition, that my genitalia was touching other genitalia of women in cafeteria and open confines with students. And I'm like, check the cameras.
Right.
I'm like, so there was just an absolute attempt of collusion with all the individuals who got to be at work as I had to be at home.
So now, this wasn't happening in a private office way
No,
off in the cut, right? This is in front of students or in a
this is
wide
in a,
area,
this
right?
is at a, this was said to have taken place at a school, but the first incident that happened was in a hallway, open hallway. I said, you guys can check the cameras. I was
Mhm.
just simply showing her the controls and the filters of the program. Was there no longer than 3 to 5 minutes, and went about the rest of my day. 2 days later, I'm sent home. And so I've had to seek, what do they call, psychologists. I've had to pay legal fees, legal representation. Um, I've had to create statements with pressing timelines from the private investigator to inflict stress. Thank God I know how to write with immense accord. Then ultimately, I was found exonerated of all charges. I was given no apology. And then on top of that, once I was exonerated of all charges, I have to move to another school.
So you
Um,
still have to move to another school
yeah,
despite that they exonerate.
that's what I said. And I'm like, why? And I even asked this today. I said, why is it that I've been found free of all charge, but I have to move to another environment? I said, what about the false accusations of my accuser? Where is the sanction? Where is the reprimand or some type of civil discord for them?
Mhm.
Oh, we just, and I got an email saying, well, to create a better working environment for our students, you will be assigned to another camp. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, it, and then I've had documentation saying that I'm free of all trouble, all cause or whatever, and that I'm supposed to return to work and be worked on, and to be integrated with a school leader. And they completely went against their own procedures and policies to remove me and place me at another school. And I'm like, how are you going to go against your own procedures? Number one. Number two, I had yet to create a statement on my behalf for this entire 4 month ordeal. And I was just trying to figure stuff out because I've never been in this situation like this before. And the accuser, and it said in the report that the accuser was getting counseling, was getting help, was getting um, support, sympathy, therapy. And I'm like, and then when it came out to be for called wrong, I'm like, where is the sanction on the person who cried wolf when there was no wolf?
Mm-hmm.
That's like if a student pulls a fire alarm, we know they did it, but then the police show up and oh, it was just the fire alarm was pulled, but there was no fire. There are some sanctions for that. But like reading, like you said, that excerpt by Helen Adams, I think you said
Andrews, yeah.
Edgar is in real vivid time, and now I've had to suffer loss. I've had to suffer financial deficit. I'm
Now,
trying to
now, now
head
talk
on
about
straight.
that. Talk about that for a minute. You mentioned to me before you had to spend a certain amount of money on legal support just from the 3 week period, right?
$12,000. And most the average individual doesn't even have that amount of money. That money set me back, I don't know how long. And then
Mm-hmm.
on top of that, I'm still fighting it, trying to get restitution for that. And then on top of that, psychiatrist appointments, which were $200 a pop out of pocket.
Mm.
Like the average individual doesn't have that kind of money. And I'm pretty sure the average male, because I've never been in a situation of that magnitude, and I've been fortunate enough to go through all levels of education, knows how to navigate such a circumstance.
Right.
So it's just, yeah, it's just been a taxing
Well,
time.
and the other thing is there's nothing preventing it from happening to you again tomorrow.
And that's what I had some family members tell me, like, I need to make sure that I'm making best possible scenarios or precautions to get out of there. Me, because like I said, who's to say that somebody looks at me and say, oh, he looked at me funny. Oh, he looked me up and down. He walked too close. And that's taken for, like I said, this was taken for face value. I asked for cameras. I said I asked for cameras. I said me and my counsel, we even measured physically that it's physically impossible for my genitalia to touch a person's hip when they're standing almost 3 feet higher from my waistline.
Mm.
And just in the preponderance of the evidence against the accuser, like they didn't, like they just like, oh well, okay, you're free now. Go work at this school, and that's, I'm like, there's no apology, there's no sympathy, there's no Mr. Collins, we apologize. Mr. Collins, how can we make this better? Mr. Collins, we want to work to, make sure you, like, it's just
Well, let me
whatever,
let me let
whatever.
me
Go ahead, go ahead.
let me show you this. So this is a comment that was just made. It says that's what made me back out of teaching this year. 4 accusations in 16 years, all lies. Tell me something. Was this a student, a teacher, administrator? What was this?
This was a member of the leadership team, because I'm a member of the leadership team, another African American female.
Okay. Now you also mentioned that there were others that somehow.
Yeah, there were out of nowhere in the report. Mind you, I have a photograph memory. I don't recall any of this. Another individual, and then the private investigator, she has slipped up because she just basically said my genitalia was everywhere. She said for the second individual, my genitalia touched another person's genitalia while sitting down in a cafeteria with other students. So that means I would physically have to sit on this individual's lap, face to face, put my genitalia on hers for a prolonged period of time, as I said in the report. And then there are other students around with cameras. I said, check the cameras. How egregious of an account is that to be absolutely believable? And then when I asked for footage, it would say, "Oh, footage of no incidents has happened." So I said, "So what are we talking about?" And then on top of that, they said last year another individual had some instance with me, and then I even talked to the principal who was there last year, and they said that's egregious and a false as well, because nothing that ever came across his desk. So there was practical collusion going on.
So wait a minute. So you're saying another accusation came up from a year ago? Is this one you?
Who? Yes, one from a year ago, and then another one saying I put my genitalia on her genitalia and her shoulder in the
Okay.
cafeteria.
Now, were these two that you knew about, that they had confronted you with, or did they
No,
just come out of nowhere?
these came out of nowhere, and these two individuals wouldn't even put their name in the report.
Right, right. And you had no influence on whatever decision they came to. I mean, they
No,
came to you and said you still have your job, but they just could have easily said, you know what, we're letting you go,
yeah,
and you wouldn't have had any influence, impact, anything. You just
yeah. I've been at home for 4 months, 3 months. With no, I haven't even had the opportunity to give a statement formally to the school. I had to give it to a private investigator,
not a police officer or a detective, right?
not a police officer, not an official of the law, a hired private investigator who was doing their best job to make all evidence and all circumstances line up in the best interest of their vendor, which is the school.
Wow. Yeah. Now, this is something that impacts men in a lot of different occupations, but teaching is one where we're extremely vulnerable, not only from other, staff, faculty we interact with, but the students as well. I mean, you give a student a grade they don't like, you say something they don't like, they can put forth an accusation that, without any evidence, and you're subject to scrutiny and have to worry about your career.
Yeah. And I was just like, and I'm like, I'm a doctor of education. I've been in education for 22 years. I've never had any egregious accounts of any sexual misconduct ever. All of a sudden, I have three in less than a week.
Mm,
How?
mm,
How?
wow. Now, is there anything that you've learned in this time period that you wish you knew before, or anything you could tell somebody else who's going through it as far as advice? Anything you can share?
Um, I will say, just in working constraints or confines, I've learned, and I will take this to my grave: never be in the room with a woman alone. I will never be in a room. I will. There will be an open door. There will be somebody who will go in there with me. I will never go into any. I don't care how big open. It could be a cavity. It could be an auditorium. We're in a gym. I will never go into another room with a woman alone. I also learned that in the midst of these situations, to contact your local equal employment opportunity office, because they can provide assistance. It's at a slower rate than that of a lawyer. They will give you a time frame on the number of days you have to file, and they will conduct an investigation on your behalf. I think here where I'm at, I had 180 days to do it, or to actually go in and make my situation apparent to them. And then but then I had to make, and then they have to go do their fines and conduct it. So you want to do that as soon as possible. What I've also learned is, this is, I just think, I mean, I'm just blessed to have this skill. You have to be able to vividly write and explain this in detail when talking to lawyers, counsel, or any representation, because many may not take on such a case. They'll just think of it just as something that's minute, something that's not necessarily of a serious accord. Because I contacted several firms, and then I had to write or literally type my case out, and many of them told me no. And I was able to find actually one who did take it on. And then that was a whole nother ordeal. But it's just a very pressing time. And then, like I said, you're pressed for time. You have to align words and statements, and thank God I have a great memory. Some people may not have a great of a memory and visualization of accounts as me. And you have to be dead on, spot on, even when sending emails, because anything that's off kilter, well, they could say, well, you said this. Because I just remember talking in emails with the private investigator. There were several instances where she completely missed the ball. So that was evidence in my court. But you
Mhm.
have to be very judicious on the things that you say and that you type going forward, because you don't want to have any mispronunciations. You don't want to have misinterpretations, and so you need to read things, very slowly, and just take all elements of paradigm or happenstance and reality that could potentially come to fruition. I think that's just some of the tips I got from this entire ordeal.
Well, man, I'm sorry that this happened to you, brother, but these are the kind of things we got to talk about, because I'm looking through the chat. Brothers are talking about having similar experiences, and I knew it would be the case. This is not as rare as it should be. This is not something that is only happening to celebrities. This is happening to everyday brothers who often don't have the means to be litigious and take people to court. They're just trying to work every day, have families to feed, trying to, achieve their goals. And there's no protection.
Right.
There's no checks and balances. There's no protection. You're just subject to the whims of who you're working with, as well as the whims of whatever kangaroo court they put together, because they rarely, and this happens on college campuses as well, they will rarely pull in law enforcement. This is something that will often be
like that's why I was like, take tapes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there was no, I'm like, there's no evidence. So why even proceeding down this road if the eye in the sky is not live? So, right. But they had to, make some points, some stuff. And then just my last point going forward, what I've realized as a result of this circumstance, that I just had several run-ins with women in academia, whether they were a teacher, whether they tried to kick me out of a class, they tried to belittle me, whether I've worked in a working environment where they've become either intimidated, or they've become harassable, or they've become perturbed just by my presence. And I'm simply there to do my job, but any type of indifference or some type of feeling or emotion that is stirred in them towards a negative connotation is a complete been my fault. And I'm like, how is it that I'm able to how is it that me making you feel this way, or whatever in type of indifferent way on your own accord can lead to my ultimate, let's just say, demise at work. That's just something I've been in all my years of education, whether I'm learning or actually working. So yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you being willing to share. Keep me abreast of how things go. You said they're sending you to a new spot. Do you think you'll stay working there, or stay in your field for that matter? Or for the long term, what do you think you'll do? Uh-oh. It looks like I lost. Okay, hold on. Here he goes.
No, I didn't know. Sorry about that.
No. Right. I'm about to jump in a second. I just want to ask the last question. What do you think you'll do long term? You think you'll stay in your field? You think you'll stay with where you're working?
I mean, because I've committed, I definitely will not stay where I'm working. But because I've been in the field and I just ultimately dedicated myself to the field, I'm going to stay in the field. And then just one more key component that I forgot to mention, sorry to press on, but I was just saying, talking to my counsel, if this false accusation were to stick, my entire career would be turned upside down and ruined because of what a woman thought she saw or he thought she felt. And I'm like, what is the price that you can put on all my education, all my years of experience, all the things that I've done to pick up and retool and find another career at the rightful age that I am? That's just something that was just almost terrifying to think of in this whole entire circumstance.
Well, look, man, thanks again. And like I said, keep me abreast. And if we need to bring you back in, if something else happens, I'm happy to.
All right.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right.
Now, I'm looking through the chat, just letting you know this isn't a call-in. These are three individuals that I reached out to before the show to ask them to come on up, because I knew if I did a call-in, we'd be here all night. This is so I just kind of wanted to get through that. So the second gentleman, I'm about to bring you up, restart the clock, as it were. All right. Can you hear me, sir? Hello. We were having some device issues a second ago. He went out, came back in. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. I can't say your name, but can you hear me? You should be on the screen. Say something, even if you're not sure if you're the one that's up.
Testing.
Hey, there you go. All right. And he dropped out. He dropped out. So I guess he'll be back up in a second. All right. I'll just go a little bit out of order and bring up my third gentleman up second. And oh, wait a minute. Hold on. He just popped in. Let me see. All right. Can you hear me?
Testing.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, very good.
All right. So appreciate you coming up, man. Tell us now, for you, it could be one incident, it could be multiple, because I know you've had multiple. But yeah, you know what we're talking about. Tell us your experience, what you want to share with us.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, just want to say thank you for the invite and allowing me to be on your show. You do some great work. And as you know, I'm always sharing your scholarship with my students any chance I get. So I am a higher education administrator. As you know, I work in higher education, as do you, on the student affairs side, while you're, of course, on the faculty side. But this has been career long for me. When we talk about issues of anti-Black misandry, I would argue that it first I became aware of it as a graduate student. And I think you've talked about on numerous occasions, as a graduate student, these are environments that typically are dominated by women.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, these young ladies, due to K through 12 background, believe that they are intellectually superior to men and take umbrage when you have the capacity and ability to challenge them intellectually. As a result, I had a number of experiences. There's a good brother of mine who's actually a marketing executive right now in a city and state that I won't mention. But we were in graduate school together. He talked about you would push back intellectually with factual information, scholarship, etc. He said, and those young women would go off and act like you were a damn criminal.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I succeed. I finished graduate school. I go into my PhD program. And that's where it really became, the anti-Black misandry became palpable, if one would say. In terms of just the direct statements, I don't feel comfortable around you because you have a deep voice. You're very masculine. Change who you are when you enter into the room. You speak with a lot of confidence. That makes me uncomfortable. I mean, really projecting their insecurities, but also promoting this concept and idea that as a heterosexual Black man, I am somehow the perpetual boogeyman. Right. My mere presence is problematic. We know that this is really part of American folklore, this concept of the Black man being problematic for a myriad of reasons. So something to consider.
Now, before you get into a specific incident, if you wouldn't mind, talk to me real quick about how your physicality is received in these spaces.
Yes. So, and you know this, I'm a former football player, former boxer. So I'm about maybe 6'1", 225, 230, I work out on a regular basis. And so that was an issue as well, right? There was a situation in which young lady literally stated, and this was supported by white female professors, even some Black female professors, that my masculinity made her uncomfortable. Even though I wasn't saying or doing anything that was untoward, my masculinity made her uncomfortable. And as a result of that, what would take place is, okay, he could challenge me intellectually. I don't like that. But then the other caveat was the fact that he's physically foreboding. I can't try to browbeat him or threaten him physically. So that becomes a whole other issue as to why they take issue and umbrage with my presence. And I say that because the young lady who took umbrage with stating, your masculinity makes me uncomfortable, I ended up running into her at a grocery store late one night with her boyfriend. And this guy was maybe 5'4", 110 pounds, wouldn't look me in the face, gave me a dead fish handshake. And I said, okay, I see what's going on here. This is what she likes. Someone that she could control, browbeat, etc. So that plays a role as well.
Okay. Talk to us about your experiences in the workplace.
Yes. So, and as you know, I'm a former professor. So I had a situation in the classroom. I'm teaching African American history, and a young lady was not doing well in the course. It was very simple. You do the readings for the week, write a reflection, right? As you may know, when you're teaching graduate students, oftentimes you have to let them know that your expectation is that when you're reviewing their reflections, you're grading for grammar. you're grading for content, not grammar, right? And so have to take points off, right? And the young lady took umbrage with that. And she came to me and said, I don't understand why I got to see multiple weeks on my reflections. I said, well, I provide copious notes, right, via, the campus system. And her response was, well, I just think you be looking at me in a manner that's inappropriate. So I said, okay, well, let's talk turkey. I said, because it's January, it's 10 degrees and 2 feet of snow on the ground, and you got on a beanie and a parka from your neck to your knees. How am I looking at you inappropriately? I mean, make me aware of this. Well, I just feel like, I said, listen, I'll tell you what you should do. You need to go report this to the department chair of humanities right now. She goes and reports this to the, chair of humanities, who is a little white woman who I actually had a great rapport with, working relationship with. She makes the report. I go see my supervisor after I finish teaching all my classes for the day. My supervisor says, that young lady's lying. I knew right away. I said, how so? She said, because the moment I asked her what you were doing or how you were looking at her inappropriately, her response was, I'm not doing well in the class. Now, here's the issue. My supervisor told her, hey, you need to, have some grit, right? Respond intellectually, not emotionally to the information you're learning, finish the course. That wasn't good enough for her. She went all the way to the vice president of student affairs, academic affairs, and continued to promote this, concept and idea of me looking at her in a manner that made her uncomfortable, to where they put pressure on my supervisor not to bring me back the next semester. Yeah. So that would be one example. Another example would be something I'm currently going through, as you know. Once again, my presence making individuals uncomfortable, being able to challenge students intellectually, particularly young women intellectually, something oftentimes they're not accustomed to. There were, of course, some false accusations made. There was a pseudo, of course, investigation done, but I was able to, in writing and, of course, verbally, refute those claims with factual information. And, of course, they tried to shoot me some money to kind of quietly push me out the door, but I have obtained counsel to actually go after the university for a substantial sum.
Now, let me say something on behalf of I know for sure 2 out of my 3 guests. Some of the reason why you're not hearing an incredible amount of detail is not because they don't have it. It's because in 2 of the situations, they're still pursuing a legal response. And so, I've asked them to be very careful about what they share, just so that, nothing's impacted. So to that extent, for some degree of a lack of detail, I apologize, but that's not their issue. It's mine. So, and trust me, I've talked to these gentlemen privately. They got plenty of detail. It's just, they have to be very careful about what they can share. But, yeah, I don't want to stop you from continuing on your current situation if you want to go there, but you've also had experiences in your field where you've been kind of pushed out, if I remember correctly, from different positions because of your masculinity. You talked a little bit about it in terms of graduate school, but I think you had some issues when you took professional positions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some of it even took place during the interview process. I was interviewing at an institution that, of course, will remain nameless, where during the interview, I was asked what should have been a difficult question, but I'm him, not them. And so I do my due diligence in the interview prep process, and I answered the question brilliantly. And the search committee chair, who was a woman, said to me, that's great, but I just think a woman would do the job better. This took place during the interview. Now, there's a couple of things that we can unpack for that. One, of course, we know that it's discriminatory. That is a violation of Clause 7 of the 14th Amendment, right? Equal protection under the law, based on gender. The second issue is that she was so, I would say, comfortable with the power that she has as a woman in this space, that she doesn't even see it as a problem to, on a recorded Zoom interview, make a claim that is blatantly discriminatory in nature. Yeah. And so you talk about this a lot of times. It comes down to power. They are threatened by the presence of Black men, particularly Black men who are able to challenge them intellectually.
I mean, I've seen this I've seen them get so comfortable. One brother reported to me he was on a hiring committee a couple of years ago, and he said the very first day they met, if you've never been on a hiring committee, you're there with usually 3 to 4 other people, and you guys are, going through applications to see who you're going to hire to work in your department. And, just like the brother said a moment ago, there are legal issues on, in hand in terms of discrimination. So you can't say that we're only going to hire a woman or a man or a black person or a white. You can't, that's technically illegal, right? But they've been comfortable enough to say, well, look, we're going to hire a black woman in this position, and that's it. And that's day one, right?
Right.
But the degree to which they're that comfortable speaks to you about how often this takes place and how little pushback they get. And I understand why, because you have to work with these people. And if and Helen Andrews kind of touches on this, that if you are not in lockstep with the rest of the department, the office, wherever you are, whatever industry you're in, you can be subject to the group opinion about you. And that can cost you your career in
Correct.
certain instances. But anything else you want to share, let us know.
Yeah, so the previous brother, he talked about, having the capacity to articulate your position in writing and, of course, verbally. I think that's extremely important. We know Frantz Fanon, the Martinique political activist, philosopher, and, of course, Pan-Africanist and psychiatrist, stated that mastery of language affords one remarkable power. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think, lucky for us, we're in a privileged position where we have tenure, we have, of course, terminal degrees, and we have the capacity to push back against these false accusations. But I think also this is a situation where, as you speak to, we have to look at policy that will actually protect us from these just false accusations that women use as a way to try to feminize the whatever professional industry that one is in.
Now, if you would, do you have any thoughts for anybody who might be going through this? And keep in mind, or at least I want the audience to keep in mind, this is a brother who works in a field that is predominantly female run, right? So there's nothing. Now, this has happened to him several times, from graduate school through his professional career up to now. There's nothing preventing it from happening at the next one. There are no checks and balances. There are no protections. Nothing seems to be evidence-based. What would you suggest that somebody going through this kind of do to navigate it?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One, the brother mentioned, of course, you never want to be alone with a female student. The other issue, I think, one thing you have to do is kind of read the room, right? And I hate to say this because I'm not someone who believes that we should police ourselves in a manner that is speaking to or providing power to or legitimizing a person's prejudices. But sometimes it's good for us to try to avoid certain persons or conversations. And I think third, it always comes down to who's your authorizing agent? Who is your direct supervisor? Does that person have your best interest at heart? Are they going to look out for you? Are they going to protect you? Or are they going to actually feed into the nonsense and the misandry?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, unless there's anything else you want to share, man, I want to thank you for coming on through. I really appreciate it. I know you got a lot going on. And, the brother actually has to move behind, what he's dealing with, so this is not just, go across the street and get another position somewhere. He has to actually move and
across the country
and set up shop somewhere else and go through this process. Right. So anyway, but yeah, man, unless there's anything else you want to share, I just want to thank you for coming through.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Let me see here. All right. So we got our last gentleman. And again, remember, the degree to which they're not going into detail is not their issue. It's mine. But I just want to make sure I protect the brothers that I bring up. So this is the last one. Let me go ahead and bring him up. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you, Doc. How's it going?
It's good, man. How about yourself?
I'll live for being an old man.
Now you sound a little far away.
How about this? This better?
A little bit. So talk to us, man. Tell us about, and you can tell us about the situation you told me about, but if you have any others, share those too, if you will.
Well, no, it's pretty much just this one.
Okay.
I am a longtime IT professional. So I never really have many jobs where I come into contact with women.
Mm.
All right. So, like the last gentleman is in education. So he's used to constantly dealing with, the nuances of dealing with people who might get offended by a masculine presence. Whereas I'm usually locked in a room with a bunch of servers and I don't really come into contact with people. I'm pretty much a big geek.
Okay.
So I moved from Atlanta to New York City because I got this job in 2017. Now, this job is a huge data center for a huge campus. There's like between 900 to 1200, 900 to 1200 employees on this campus. It is a large data center, so it's like basically a sealed room
Mm.
with no windows, and you basically stay in there all day, and nobody else has access. So I don't really come into contact with many of the other employees. I'm here about a year, and I begin to like leave the office a little bit more to do other projects. So I go from being in the office and nobody sees me, and then I start coming out just a little bit. I meet a young South Asian woman, and we become friends. We start having lunch alone together.
Mm.
Now, I'm not going to say this is the reason why. I'm just saying this is what happened. So now that I'm having lunch with this young lady every day, I have a reason to leave my data center. So I'm going to the public lunchroom now.
Mm.
Um, it's around this time where I get an email one day and I am asked to come to a room. Now it's a regular ticket. So I think I'm going in there to patch a phone line. I think I'm going in there to check somebody's internet connection. And I go in a room and there's four lawyers just sitting in there.
Wow.
So they asked me to have a seat and they start asking me questions. They tell me that somebody called in to an anonymous tip and said that I tried to force myself on this action.
Mm.
Now, if I recall, they said that I grabbed this person by the arm, tried to force myself on them, showed them pornographic material on my phone, and called them a ratchet hose. Not ratchet hoe, ratchet hose. And I'm like, sitting there listening to all this. Now, I'm not from a particularly urban area. My mother was an English teacher, right? So I don't actually talk like that. The word ratchet wouldn't be in my dictionary. So I, which I shouldn't have done at the time. I should have read the room better. But I just thought it was so incredulous, for them to make such an accusation. I chuckled. I
Mm.
sat back in my chair. I wasn't defensive at all. I put my hands behind my head while I was chuckling because I just thought there is absolutely no way that this could happen to me.
Mm.
So, yeah, I don't think I took it seriously enough. And I just, they're like, did this happen? And I was like, I categorically deny this, right? There's just absolutely no way. The lawyers were done with their questioning, and I figured there would be nothing more of it, right? There'd be no way for me to. I'm like the other guy was saying. I'm a little bit larger. Like I'm 6'2", 237.
Mm.
If I grabbed somebody, and I'm a big old dark skinned black man. If I
Mm-hmm.
grab somebody by their arm, there would be bruises. If I try,
Mm.
you know what I'm saying? That's why I'm just sitting up there saying there's no way anything could happen to me. I'm telling the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't fear anything in 2017, 2018 if you're telling the truth. And
Mm.
that's exactly what I thought. I wasn't exactly red pill at this time.
Mm.
So I I continue my day at work. I go to the company volleyball game the next day, thinking everything's okay. The third day I come into work, my badge doesn't work.
Mm.
A woman who knew me walks up and she goes, "Oh, you can't get in?" I'm like, "No." She badges me in. This is how much of a threat I am that another coworker badges me in. I walk in, the security guard says hi to me. I start walking to my post, and all of a sudden, security guards start coming around the corner.
Mm.
And they say, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. We got to walk you out." Like, what happened? You've been fired. They asked us to come and get you. So now I'm being walked out by 3 security guards like I'm some kind of villain. And I have to walk past the bullpen where a lot of the employees are. And it was very extremely humiliating.
Right.
So like I moved for this job and for the money that this job provided. In this era where we're always talking about, high value men and this, that, and the third, this was a New York City job. So you can just tell how much money it was making. And that was all gone.
So comfortable enough to say it's 6-figure range?
Yes. And so before that, I'm in Atlanta washing cars, right? Not using my education at all, living with my relatives, just trying to get on my feet. And so this job was a huge break for me at that point in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So the fallout of this, I couldn't tell people because I didn't know how they would react. Even people who I considered friends or relatives, I didn't know if they would say, "Well, he wiggled his way out of it," or a female family member did say, "There's 2 sides to every story: his side, her side, the truth, and the truth is usually somewhere in the middle."
Right.
I absolutely don't believe that because there is no truth somewhere in the middle. I did not grope a woman, grab a woman, try to force myself on a woman. So that whole perception that, well, you had to do something, nobody would just make it up. So I just didn't tell people that this happened until years later on Facebook. And the worst part, other than losing the job, I've run into people from this job in the street, and they won't even make eye contact with me. So it got out. Yeah, it was very uncomfortable. I wound up at a party, and I ran into a manager that I used to work with at this company, and he wouldn't even make eye contact with me.
The new Scarlet Letter, huh?
Seems like it.
Yeah. Wow. Were you ever, formally told who your accuser was?
No. This is why I chuckled while the lawyers were talking to me. They said that this was an anonymous person who called in via an anonymous tip line for the company. So I'm thinking, oh, there's no proof. I did nothing wrong. And you're sitting up here telling me that the person has no face, no name, just a voice on a recording saying the bad man did it. So why would I have to worry?
Right. Especially if you figure that a company is going to invest in you to the degree that they're paying you a 6-figure salary, you would imagine that they would take this seriously enough, to investigate it and so on and so forth. For them to just arbitrarily let you go is hardly the first thing you would assume when going through this.
Doc, to be a little bit haughty and arrogant, that was exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking there's no way they're going to treat this like a two boys and girls on the playground harassing each other, he said, she said type stuff.
Right.
I figured this was serious business. I figured since there was a bunch of lawyers in the room, they were going to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
I did not know that the lawyers were present to CYA. They were covering their behind. And the easiest thing to do would be to believe the anonymous woman on the phone and get rid of the evil man who did something terrible to some woman.
And so you were never officially told you were fired until security held you up. So you didn't get a letter, an email, a phone call, or you didn't get drawn into a manager's office to have a sit down. You just found out when you walked in.
Yes. To make it even worse, it was a Thursday. You could have fired me on Tuesday, so I wouldn't have had to drive all the way into the office. Like I said, so I felt, like I said, it was early in the morning, so I felt very ashamed, going through the parking lot, going through security, driving into work and all that, and then have to turn around and walk past everybody else to be fired. But I mean, hey, we're strong, right? We don't feel pain.
Well, tell me, you're right. But tell me this. So knowing what you know now, having gone through that, and no doubt having, heard a number of these situations since then, what advice would you give to anyone going through this? What do you wish you'd done differently then? What do you think?
Well, I definitely have opinions about it now. As I was saying, I did not know how, I didn't know how much of a frenzy that people would get in about Me Too and Believe All Women, right? I always thought it was going to be 50-50, he said, she said. I thought there would be some type of logic to it. The accusation against me the story didn't even make sense. If it had at least been something that had been, that could have maybe possibly happened, I could see it. But the fact that it was so ridiculous, I didn't take it seriously. And I think that my demeanor and how I wasn't scared, or how I wasn't serious when I was being interviewed, I think they kind of viewed that as almost like how they demonize men in the movies, how the guy that's arrogant is always the villain. I think I had that type of demeanor, and that rubbed the legal team the wrong way. But I think they were getting rid of me either which way. I think that in this climate, there is no recourse for anything a man can do against a false allegation. I just think should live in fear. There's really nothing you could do. What could I have done differently? Right? There is nothing I could have done differently. I literally had a job where I am in a sealed room, and 90% of the company will never see me on a normal work day. Nobody would have seen me if I didn't start coming out and having lunch with a young lady. So the only time I'm seen most of the time is I don't interact with other people. It's just highs and waves and stuff like that. And I, in this situation, got a false allegation and got shipped out the door and treated like a piece of meat.
Did you think about suing, or did you sue, or what did you do afterwards?
Oh, when I told my sister, she was furious. She was like, "We're gonna sue him." But I felt so, what's the word? Like my honor was infringed. I didn't want anybody to hear about this situation. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my father. I didn't tell my best friend.
Wow.
I didn't tell the people I was living with. I kept this very much hidden. Oh, I got fired today. What happened? The man got to me. Or, cutbacks. It wasn't until, we start talking in the manosphere in 2018 that I told the story, and then told it on Facebook. And then I told it to you this week when we were talking about it. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, no, go ahead.
No, man, I appreciate you being willing to share it, and especially on such short notice, because I don't think we communicated till yesterday.
Yes.
And you turned around and were willing to jump up today, with all you got to carry with family and work. So I appreciate you doing it. Any last words, anything you want to drop before we bounce out?
I do think it is our responsibility as middle-aged Black men to tell our stories about what's happened to us, so that these younger guys coming up know that they're not alone with these experiences, and hopefully they can learn something from us. And hopefully things will start to change. I don't want to get as bad here as it is in South Korea. That's all I got to say.
Do you see these kind of incidents as the reason men's behavior, even down to what fields we choose to go into, are changing so quickly? Do you think this has a lot to do with that, or do
I
you
think
see reasons?
I think we have uh, I think we have 1,000 years of modern society and evolution in men choosing the jobs that they'll go to. I don't think that a higher propensity to get accused of something is going to change the jobs that we're going to pick, right? I think the men who want to be educators, the men who want to be scientists, they're still going to choose the same fields. I just think when they get in particular situations like where they have to be alone in a room with a woman, they're going to just be more cautious. But I don't think this is going to change the fields we pick. Like, I mean, look at me. You can't get more of a male-dominated field than IT operations. And this still happened to me.
Well, look, man, I appreciate it. My best to the family. And I'll holler at you probably on Facebook sometime soon, man.
Okay, thanks you for having me. I'll talk to you later.
All right, man. Thanks. Let's see. Yeah. So this is what men are going through. And I can tell you, for two of them, I know for sure the situations they're going through is actually much more than what they could share. But I appreciate all three of them willing to come up. And the thing about it is, I run across so many brothers that are going through variations of this that it kind of blows me away. I hadn't asked people to come up and talk about it much sooner, but this is fairly common. Now, I want to take you to this piece that I'm going to be kind of dissecting for a while now, because I'm chewing on it. That's really what it comes down to. I'm really digesting it and trying to see where it takes me, right? So this is the piece that I mentioned earlier. This is Helen Andrews, The Great Feminization. Andrews herself is a conservative white woman, and there are a couple. Amy Wax, I believe her name is. There's a couple of conservative white women who've been talking about feminization as a practice for a little while. Now I'm gonna put up the links to everything I bring up, after I'm done with the show. Now I'm just gonna read a couple of quotes. Actually, I can do it another way. I'm gonna pull this down. I just wanted to show you the page itself, but when I provide the link, you can check it out for yourself. In the meantime, I'm going to share with you a couple of quotes from that article, and I'm going to give you a couple other examples of how feminization has been impacting men. And these are, again, everything in this show is, I'm not choosing the most egregious moments. I'm just choosing what has been randomly accessible to me within arm's length within the last couple of days, just to show you how widespread it is. But in this particular quote, she says, everything you think of as wokeness involves prioritizing the feminine over the masculine, empathy over rationality, safety over risk, cohesion over competition. She's talking about the culture of institutions, different occupations changing as women begin to predominate. And it's in mainly, certain fields. I mean, she herself talks about the law, not only in terms of law students, but judges. Right? She's talking about the changing number of women there, and that women predominate in terms of the law. She talks about journalism, and she names key papers. I believe she talked about the New York Times, but women taking over the journal. And one thing she said about that, which I really appreciated, was she said that in that, she said that, with this shift, that those who are pushing feminization in media, particularly in news media, are shaping public perception. So just like in the film examples I gave earlier, you're becoming anesthetized. You're becoming more and more used to taking on this perspective that's told to us to be the mainstream perspective, and we're kind of told that this is the way to think, this is the way to see things. But she's saying that as long as women are in predominant numbers and are able to control the narrative in these spaces, particularly as it relates to news media, that they'll be that they are already shaping perspective on how things are practiced, right? She talks about the numbers taking over the medical schools. She talks about it's already happened in colleges, and we know in certain fields like psychology, there's been a massive shift in that women have kind of taken over that. And I talked to Jeff St. James about that. If you haven't seen that discussion, you can go over to his channel. I did an interview with him, I want to say last week, where we talked a little bit in depth about his experience in graduate classes in psychology, how groupthink works, how forced consensus works in these environments, and how they often play against men. And then she gives another interesting one. I'm gonna add a couple more to it. She talks about managers, managers across different fields, in the US. And she said nearly all managers, well, that's not how she put it. She said that 46% of managers are women. And she said that number is growing rapidly, right? So we're not only talking about shaping public perception in entertainment media and news media, but on a managerial level, that is dramatically shifting in a particular way. And this simply means that, these shifts in the culture, in terms of the value systems that you can even see on the screen here: empathy over rationality, safety over risk, cohesion over competition. These become the dominant values in the space as women begin to take it over. Now, that's not to say that individual women can't be rational and individual men can't be emotional, but it is to say, as she points out, when you look at it in the aggregate, there are overarching traits that women and men bring to the table. Now, she uses this term wokeness when she's talking about this. And I think the problem with that is, when I think of wokeness, I think of race, and that's, not only because when I first heard the term, it was coming from Black folk, but even when I heard whites appropriate the term, initially we're talking about race. She uses it really to talk about gender. And so I think she should have chose something a little more related to feminism, because she speaks more about gender. But as a white conservative, I do think she probably melds gender and race and a number of these other categories together. I talked about this before. From that conservative vantage point, anything that varies from their narrative is categorized as wokeness in a particular way. But I do think she has a point as it relates to gender, because feminization explains a lot of what we're going through, a lot of what the three gentlemen I brought up here are dealing with, a lot of what some of you are dealing with, and a lot of what I've dealt with over the years, from navigating from K through 12 to graduate school, all the way through to my professional life. I've seen these values take over, and you're so caught into adapting to them to survive that you're really not paying attention to where they're coming from and what's informing them, right? So some of this is important, but I think she should have chose a term that speaks a little more directly to where these gender issues are coming from. But that aside, she kind of talks about this major shift, and I think it's important. Now, I'll add a couple more. She talked about managers. I would talk about entertainment media, which I brought up before, and I would also, in the Black community, talk about the influence of single parenthood, right? Again, the 1970s and 80s was when you saw the largest uptick in single parenthood, especially in the Black community. And what that meant was we were now being socialized by women who were able to use family courts to take control of the family, to control the upbringing of the children and the dissemination of the value system, especially as it relates to the interpretation of father, the interpretation and value of men and men's roles in families. Right? While she's changing those roles, she's able to articulate to the children how they should interpret and engage the very idea of man, not just their father, but men in general. And this has a direct impact on young Black males, young Black females growing up in these environments. And now you have a situation where you have households and families with generations with no man in sight. They're getting pregnant, they have households, they're having children, but there are no men in sight. And you can get 2-3 generations into families. I call it the gynoparestal family structure, where you have families that are connected, mother, daughter, granddaughter, cousin, auntie, and they all run households with no men in them, because they were successfully able to take advantage of the shifting policies in the 1970s and 80s with family court, most particularly no-fault divorce, and take control of families. And part of what I point to in that process is the means by which they can they can apply feminization within the family, right? This idea that women are inherently leaders, they're more they're more pure in terms of their values, they're smarter, they're more capable, they're more loving, these ideas about womanhood really become deeply set in younger generations starting in the 1970s and onward as it relates to who is disseminating this information. If this is your mother telling you this, then, for most people, you're not going to question it, right? But it begins to radically shift how we reinterpret men's and women's roles and how we define the value of manhood. Many young men are at a breaking point now. And this is, broken outside of race. I mean, white young men are dealing with this issue too, where they no longer believe that there's value in manhood, because what we've known is that manhood in and of itself has been made toxic. The very idea of manhood is toxic, right? So you got young boys believing that the more masculine they behave, the more toxic they are. So some of them are opting out altogether. Some of them are turning to engaging and emulating feminine qualities and principles because those have value. I mean, those have currency. You can actually navigate through professional spaces, through educational spaces, by communicating and taking on various feminine values in order to engage the spaces you're in and be rewarded with advancement, right? So these are the ways these kind of behaviors are being incentivized. So I would add that to the discussion that I don't think Andrew's talked about, at least in that particular piece. But there's another quote from the piece that I want to bring up here. She says, female group dynamics favor consensus and cooperation. Now, I've seen this firsthand, and I talked to you a couple shows ago about how I've seen organizations, groups, even meetings that were run with this feminization model, to where it not only was about group consensus, but there needed to be uniform, consensus. There couldn't be any pushback, even though by the letter of the charter or whatever you're using, it may just require a vote. Where, whoever, whatever vote comes in with the majority, that's it. They still will push for a unanimous decision, right? So the idea of consensus is in play, even though it's not discussed aloud. She says, men order each other around, but women can only suggest and persuade. Any criticism or negative sentiment, if it absolutely must be expressed, needs to be buried in layers of compliments, right? The outcome of a discussion is less important than the fact that a discussion was held and everyone participated in it. The most important sex difference in group dynamics is attitude to conflict. In short, men wage conflict openly, while women covertly undermine or ostracize their enemies. So this is essentially schoolyard mean girl practices, but this is becoming the norm. As feminization begins to hold sway in a wide set of environments, these schoolyard mean girl practices have actually become part of the fabric of how we function in professional spaces, right? Very little direct confrontation. This, even what we were talking about with the three men that came up to talk about their situations, none of them were introduced or told who their accuser was. They weren't introduced to them. They weren't told who they were. They really weren't even, for a couple of the cases, told exactly what the accusations were. It was inferred. There were, general statements, but it was also implied that there were other things that weren't being communicated clearly. And you'll notice that one of the most consistent things that took place is they kept law enforcement out of the process. Now, I'm not saying that law enforcement is perfect, that, it's the solution to our issues. But what I am saying is they made sure to keep it out of the dynamic. Why? Because law enforcement, at least the idea of it, is that there needs to be some kind of reference to evidence, rationality, right? So they sidestepped all of that. And now you have spaces where your entire career rests on the attitudes, perceptions, and almost whimsical moment-to-moment feelings about you from any random person. And you now have to worry about how seriously the institution will take that random accusation simply because it was made. And as it relates to Black men, and more men are finding this to apply to them, the accusation is the conclusion. The fact that you were accused in and of itself is enough, right? To where even if you're able to prove, and I'm gonna show you an example of this in a moment, even if you're able to prove in a court of law that the accusations are false, you are still branded as, one who was accused who's done what he was accused of. We saw this with Jonathan Majors, right? How many opportunities he lost, how many positions he lost, how many roles he lost simply because he was accused. And even when exonerated, there were no apologies. What did the first interviewee say? There was no apology, even though he was found innocent. Now, I should say, because I don't think we mentioned it, he was found to be, if we could use the term, not guilty, like within the last 24 hours. He just found that out. I had talked to him, I want to say yesterday. I didn't know that he got excused from these accusations until he was talking about it on the show. So he just found out after weeks of sitting at home, right? So he just found out, but still didn't know who his accuser was, still didn't have a full list of what he was being accused of. Apparently other people jumped in to chime in, but there was no camera evidence, recordings, nothing was brought to bear. Everything happened internally. Luckily, he was able to keep his job. But again, what protections do you have from this happening again in the next place? And this is why this issue of feminization is so important as it relates to men, right? Because there is no protections. There are no guarantees. There are no checks and balances. Even though when you talk about law enforcement, most people can't afford to keep up in that space. But at the very least, you have the idea that you could take somebody to court and have this addressed. But when you're dealing in these private spaces or these spaces that don't bring in law enforcement, you're subject often to the whims of those spaces. And this becomes a highly vulnerable moment for many men to address, right? Now, I'm going to cover a couple of examples of feminization. And now these are somewhat random in and of themselves. So I'm going to ask, I'm just going to play the real quick snippet just to make sure you guys can hear it. I'm going to start on the left. This is actually from a show with the name of the show escapes me. So if you remember it, shout it out in the chat. Indeed, Nate Parker. Thank you. That's a perfect example. I wrote a blog piece on him, about what took place with him in the 90s when he was an unknown college student, wrestler, right? Where he was actually found innocent in a court of law with an all-white jury. And yet years later, by the time his film on Nat Turner comes out, he's retried in the court of public opinion and found guilty and essentially canceled, for something that happened much earlier that he was proved to be innocent from. So yeah, these things definitely happen. So let me see. So the first one, I can't remember the lady's name, but she's a therapist. She has a show. Some of you may have watched it. I've watched a few episodes. But this is an interesting one. Now, this one is about 4 minutes, 40 seconds, somewhere around there. And this is not actually really about her. There's another therapist commenting on this session that's about to take place. And I'm just going to kind of pull back and kind of observe. So I want you to observe something that takes place. So anyway, here we go. Let me pull this up. Let me know with a 1 in the chat if you can hear this quick little snippet.
So,
damn it. All right. Sorry. I need to make sure this goes fully. Okay. I see it. It slipped out. All right. So it needs to go. We got to put this through the right setting. All right. So let's try it again.
can I ask?
Okay. So give me a 1 if you heard that. Was that clear? Okay. I'm seeing some 1s. All right. So this is a session that with a black couple and a white therapist, and there'll be a black woman therapist that's going to comment on this session. So here we go.
Ask you, India, you said earlier it's different to speak to someone who's other than to each other. Do you feel, as a person of color, a lot of discomfort to talk to me?
There is still the layer of, I'm speaking to a white woman right now.
Right.
I need to address it in a certain way.
Yeah.
But I want to face it head on.
Mhm.
I want to talk to you, the white person, about it.
Yeah.
Because this is how we move forward. This is how we get better.
Hello, my name is Dr. Raquel Martin. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, professor, scientist, and podcast host. And if you're here to learn. So let's talk about asking questions such as, is my whiteness in the room, and how it can impact clients in session. Questions like these don't always hit the mark, especially when Black clients are navigating emotional survival strategies with each other. And that's what's happening here. As therapists, we're often taught to name power dynamics like whiteness in the room, and sometimes that's essential. But other times it becomes a detour that shifts attention away from what's really unfolding between clients. Let me give you an example.
I do admire the fact that she can act freely with her emotions. For me, being a Black man, that's a little bit different.
Right.
I'm not allowed in society to just be be mad.
Mm-hmm.
It's a luxury that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of,
But even with that, do you see what just happened?
Yeah.
There are a lot of moments like this where I'm almost like, are we sharing the same Black experience?
Yeah.
Because I know you are going through what Black
Yeah.
men go through, but you don't tap into that. You don't talk about that.
In this session, a Black man shared, she gets to be angry and I don't. He was naming something really incredibly real. The reality that as a Black man, anger can feel too dangerous to express. Society criminalizes Black men, their anger. And as a result, the woman responded with,
there are a lot of moments like this where I'm almost like, are we sharing the same Black experience?
Yeah.
Because I know you are going through what Black
Yeah.
men go through, but you don't tap into that. You don't talk about that.
and I sat with that because I heard something else too. To me, it felt like she was saying, I know the world doesn't allow you to be angry. I know that anger lives inside of you, but I don't see it, not even with me. Now, here's where I think the therapist missed an opportunity. Instead of leaning into that dynamic, they pivoted to, do you feel discomfort speaking to me, a white woman? Which is a fair question, but I don't think it was the right question in the moment. Because here's what was sitting right between them. The layered racialized display rules around anger for both Black men and Black women. Black men are policed as aggressive or threatening. Black women are labeled as hostile, difficult, or angry Black women. But here's the thing. Just because this woman might show anger in this relationship doesn't mean she feels free to show it everywhere. In fact, her ability to show anger here in that relationship might also be a sign of emotional closeness with her partner. It might be that she feels safe enough to let him see a fuller range of emotion, including frustration or anger. And that's where I would have stepped in as a psychologist. I might have said, what would make you feel safe showing anger, showing your full emotional self in this relationship? Because to me, it sounded like she might be saying, I know the world doesn't allow you to be angry, but I don't see it here with me. You don't bring it into this relationship, which can be seen as a desire for emotional closeness, because anger isn't bad. Anger is human. And when Black men and women are taught to suppress it outside, they can also suppress it inside, even with each other. And he might also mute it in love and in intimacy and in vulnerability. And that can make emotional connection hard. That's where the missed mark was about centering whiteness. It missed sharing the wound that both of them have carrying into this relationship, because if anger gets locked away, often so does grief and sadness and tenderness. They might be locked away too. So, licensed mental health professionals, therapists, it's really important to understand how gendered racism shapes emotional safety for both Black men and Black women. Instead of emotionally centering whiteness, you have to notice the cultural scripts that Black clients are living out between each other. You need to create openings for mutual recognition. For example, I might have said something like, I wonder if both of you have learned that anger isn't safe to express in this world, just in different ways. Can we explore that? It's not that naming whiteness is wrong. It's not. But in the moment like this, it might not be the right intervention. Our role as clinicians are to help Black clients see each other through the survival strategies that they've been taught and create spaces where they can show up fully. Once again, if you are a licensed health professional, your job is not to show them that race isn't in the room. Race is always in the room. Your job is to show them that racism isn't. Once again, my name is Dr. Raquel Martin, and follow me for more anti-oppressive therapy and emotional safety techniques.
All right. So here you have two different therapists weighing in on this situation. Did either one of them observe that he was cut off and unable to finish his thought, and that all three women seemed quite comfortable with that? Did that come into the discussion at all? Even the second therapist, did she acknowledge that that had taken place? See, it sounds like a small thing, but it really isn't. If therapy comes down to two people, especially, marital therapy, couples therapy, whatever it may be, two people being able to articulate themselves. If you come out of a field that is predominantly female run, what does that actually mean on the ground as it applies to men who are engaging these spaces in good faith, trying to improve their relationships? But these kinds of incidents take place. Now, that's just one incident, but I thought it was interesting in that whole segment to have two therapists commenting on this. They focused on the race of the white therapist. They focused on the Black woman's thoughts. There was quick mention about the Black man not being able to express his emotions. But short of that, the fact that he was cut off in the middle of doing so was left out of the discussion. Now, here's the thing. If you watch the whole show and he was able to go into detail later, that's fine. That's great. But we're watching a segment where two therapists are engaging something that is happening in the moment within the course of this video. And yet, he was irrelevant. His thoughts were irrelevant. His concerns were irrelevant. They were dismissed even in the course of analyzing it. This second video is from Jason Derulo. This is less than 2 minutes. But this is the singer, Jason Derulo, talking about a lawsuit situation that he dealt with. Let me make sure you guys can hear it. Give me a 1 if you can.
There's a lawsuit.
Okay, so let me know if you heard that. Apologize for doing it, but y'all know how we got to do on YouTube. Sometimes you got to make sure you were able to hear it. All right, so Blood Crow says you heard it. Beautiful. All right, let's check it out.
Not too long ago by an artist that was like hired to your label that was dismissed
twice.
What did you learn going through that?
Never work with women.
Oh, come on.
There's truth in every joke. But it's a sad truth. Like, I will never be alone in a room with a woman that I work with, like ever again.
Why?
It's too risky. That case was dismissed twice in 2 different states. And there's hardly no mention of it online. When that case was brought up, it was on every single blog, every single front page. And I lost so many brand deals, relationships off of a story that was not even slightly believable. She said I sacrificed a goat in a sexual ritual. All people read was the headline, right? And that's all it takes to lose everything. That's a crazy concept. I lost millions of dollars off of an arbitrary story that some woman told. Like a crazy, crazy story that some woman told. So, with that being said, how can I be comfortable being in a room with a woman that I work with and not feel like she can just say whatever she wants? It's like, it's not worth it to me.
You know, I've heard over the years, when men start talking about these things, I've heard women online say things like, well, why are you concerned about a celebrity? That has nothing to do with you. Especially if it's something like a divorce, right? A multi-million-dollar divorce, whether she's a gold digger. And what I've heard it kind of dismissed, in terms of when men are talking about it, it's dismissed, from the framework of, well, these are celebrities who are dealing with millions. You're just an everyday dude. Why is this important? You shouldn't even be talking about this. These are deflective shaming tactics. Because the reality of it is, we know what happens in regard to divorce doesn't just happen to millionaire celebrities by any means, right? Often the reason that men are drawn to some of these high profile divorces is because everyday men are going through very similar divorces. And so some of these, high profile divorces are almost tentpole issues because they speak to what a lot of men go through every day. Now, Jason Derulo is talking about a major lawsuit, right? That was frivolous. He was frivolously accused of something that could not be proven. There was no evidence of. He denied doing it, and yet he suffered. His reputation suffered. His income suffered. His deals suffered. That's very much like the 3 gentlemen we interviewed earlier. Everyday brothers dealing with their day-to-day situations, losing work, being pushed out of careers, all because of frivolous accusations that have no basis. So this is something that's affecting millionaire celebrities, but it's also affecting everyday men. And if this can happen to the guy working at a grocery store, bagging groceries, all the way up to high profile singers, performers, and athletes, then there's something there to be talked about, right? And when you add that to the legacy of, the history of Black males and our particular set of stereotypes, those attributed to us, particularly in North America, you can't tell me those things aren't connected. Now, there's one last thing I want to show you. Now, I've been talking about Helen Andrews and I've mentioned Amy Wax. I haven't shown her. Amy Wax is an older white woman. I believe she taught at at Harvard. She's a conservative as well, right? So you got conservative women who are starting to talk about this issue of feminization. But I ran across one who was a progressive. And the reason I want to show you a little bit of an interview she gave is to kind of talk to you about how this is not necessarily a conservative issue as much as some people want to dismiss it. That's one of the things I've already heard. You know, even though I'm just running into, now I've run into academics on the left and the right over the last year and a half talking about feminization. They didn't use the term, but they were talking about the issue, mostly on the academy. That's what I've been watching over the last year and a half. I didn't do any shows on it. I was just kind of chewing on it for a little bit. Andrews is when I kind of dealt with it because she took it out of the academy and she was talking about it broadly across different fields. So I thought that was interesting. I thought that was appropriate, but she's not by any means alone. And this is not a conservative issue, right? This is not something only conservative white women are talking about. So I want to show you another. And this one, her name is Dr. Carole Hooven. Now she too, if I understand properly, taught at Harvard and kind of quit her position because she had made some comments about gender on scientific terms, and she was ostracized to such a degree that she quit her position. Her husband is also a professor at Harvard in philosophy. And I guess he had participated in a study where he did, he helped to publish or co-publish a paper that dealt with, I think it was the various terms, involved in gender from a scientific standpoint. And he was ostracized before the paper even came out. Right. So much so where they're trying to get him fired. Now, one of the things I notice with women like this, and I don't know if this applies to Helen Andrews, but most of the women I've run across that are bold enough and willing to talk frankly about issues like what we're talking about tonight is often because they have sons. This particular professor, Carole Hooven, has a son, 16-year-old son. And I don't know if we'll get to that. I'm just going to show a little bit of the interview. So we'll kind of see from there whether we get to that. I'm going to speed it up a little. I'll probably put it on 1.25. I don't know if she'll talk about, her son in this particular moment, but I do think that comes into play because usually the women that I find that are willing to even hear these situations out usually have sons. They have an investment in being willing to hear men. But anyway, so this is all right. Let me bring her up here. This is from a video called Do Women Owe Men an Apology with Dr. Carole Hooven. This is from the Unspeakeasy with Megan Dom channel. So as usual, let me go ahead and check to see if you guys can hear it. Give me a 1 if you can. Okay, so let me know if you heard that. And we'll go forward from there. Let's see. Okay, so Interlight said he did. Beautiful. All right, so we'll just listen to a little bit of this particular segment. She's talking explicitly about feminization, the feminization of the academy. All right, so let's go.
Of females as teachers at every level, not so much in college and beyond. That's the administration has become they're increasingly female, but in K through 12. There used to be a lot more male teachers. It used to be a respected profession for men. And so women are increasingly taking over. And it's, particularly, I think it's something like 80% of, I think that's about right in like K through 6, whatever it is, it's very high early on and it stays pretty high all the way through high school. So that I think has just been getting more skewed since something like the 80s. And the more females you get in academic administration and in teaching, the worse the situation is going to be for boys and young men, unfortunately, because they expect everybody to behave like the girls. They want everyone to behave like the girls who have get off on organizing their notebooks and marking the pages. And, they have fun with that. Boys are just how much shit can I stuff in my backpack? I have a 16-year-old. It's disgusting in there. I have pulled out old moldy lunch bits from weeks, it's just girls. Sure, some girls do that, but what the larger point is, it's about organization.
See, so you can see just in that she's coming at this as a mother, right? She's not coming at this from a theoretical standpoint. She's not coming at this strictly because of what she watched her husband go through, or just on an abstract level, what men have gone through statistically. She's coming at this emotionally from the vantage point of a mother. And she's framing this in terms of watching her son deal with early levels of feminization in his life, even though he's only 16. And I would no doubt bet that she's had some, she's watched him go through some experiences prior to this. But that kind of lets you know where she's coming from. And it's good to know, where people are coming from, what exactly, informs their position, how they see things, because she's only really going to be able to rock with you to the extent that it relates to her son. Oh, well, I should say, I think for many, maybe not all. But anyway, let's go.
And paying attention and sitting still and not having ADHD or not ADHD, just a more boyish nature, like wanting to run around and not just sit there and take your proper notes. And it's not like I certainly did not do that. I was a terrible student in high school. I couldn't sit still myself. So there's variation, but there are these patterns. So I think that's been getting a lot worse. And this is very sad because boys are stigmatized and punished for being boys. And
they're
that's
failed girls.
It's hard. What?
They're failed girls.
They are failed girls. And now there are programs that in some of the schools that try to fix this problem. They've looked into exactly what these programs are. And they're well-meaning, but really they're trying to get boys to listen better and to care, to be more empathetic. You can't teach boys how to be more like girls.
Teaching them not to rape. It's exactly.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be. And they're teaching them that there's something wrong with you that we're going to fix, and we're going to take the boyishness out of you. So if that's starting early on, rather than working with what you have and creating environments that support everybody, you're going to alienate boys at a young age, and they're not going to learn the same stuff as the girls are. They're not going to do as well, but it's not because they don't have the cognitive capacity. It's because the culture is not right for them. And that's a failure of understanding that these are real biological differences. So if we have the cultural narrative in the mostly progressive, mostly female, which is the worst possible combination for supporting boys and acknowledging the role of biology in human behavior, right? Those are the people in charge of the schools. And that's not working for boys in particular. So
now this is coming from a woman on the left. So I think it's important. I want to emphasize that, because this is not a conservative issue. And I want to be clear about that. But the other thing I thought about when she was talking about this a second ago, I don't want to lose it. I think I'm about to, damn it. Well, she just saying a second ago, about the whole question of rape and how they're supposed to be conditioning boys in a very particular way. Damn it. That escaped. It'll come back to me. All right, here we go.
So I think just starting there, that is a recipe for boys to feel lost, left out, not interested in school. They just kind of want to get out of there. And that's what's happening. And I think that is part of why it's getting worse. And then there's the larger cultural narrative, which is, has been a progressive narrative. That's changing now under a conservative administration, where now it's okay. Except I think now that it's going a little too far.
Right, which we knew would happen.
That is sort of mean. And but I get it, is the point. Like I feel like I understand where that's coming from.
So everything we just laid out.
Sorry. There's one more thing I wanted to say. What you mentioned Andrew Sullivan's article. So this shift from gay rights to trans rights, I think, is where the sex denial really took hold. And that has been very damaging, I think, again, for men in particular. But I think that was around 2015. You have social media, you have a shift from from gay rights to trans rights. So I think that combination of the power of social media to advocate for trans rights by one way is to punish people for talking about sex as a reality, which obviously that's personal for me. That starts to undermine the cultural support for masculinity and femininity. But
right. So she talks about, this kind of shift where this push for trans issues, trans rights becomes the entry point for attacking male heterosexuality. But I also think we need to bookend that, because this kind of shift we're noticing now against trans discourse is happening at the same time that especially middle-class white women are very frustrated with trans issues, right? Particularly as it relates to sports and winning awards and trans athletes, in women's sports. So I find it real interesting that the entrance and the exit of the validity of trans arguments are really at the behest of white women. Middle class, educated, well-to-do white women seem to be the beginning and end point of these conversations. And I don't think it's limited to trans either. I just think trans was the most extreme, but that becomes the entry point and the exit point for these discussions. We'll let her continue a little bit.
Masculinity in particular, I think, suffered and continues to.
Everything that you've laid out has fed into what is now being called the masculinity crisis. And again, I find this frustrating because it seems clear to me that this is a very real thing and it manifests in any number of ways, but there are still people who sort of aren't paying that much attention or aren't following along and kind of wave this off as like, oh, you're just, this is a moral panic or some kind of like hysteria ginned up by people on the political right. And it's really complex. I mean, this is deep stuff. So I guess, that's a very simple question. What do you think men are facing now, men and boys, and what upsets you so much about it?
A lot of women obviously hate men. They of course have fathers and husbands and kids, but they are angry at men and they don't feel that men deserve compassion because men are rapists, say. There's this narrative that because men have this capacity, and because most, serious crime and sexual harassment and sexual assault is obviously committed by men, all men are tarred with the same brush. And
Now, in Black male studies, we've been breaking these stereotypes down for really the last decade. And we've been showing that when it comes to sexual assault, even when it comes to rape, that the numbers are misleading because, what we've seen take place over the last, since about 2012, was the advent of new categories for sexual assault and rape that include men's experiences far more than they did historically prior to 2012. So we're seeing that when you actually begin to include those new categories, you find that the assault and rape numbers are actually much closer than people want to believe. And obviously that hasn't reached the mainstream. So these are progressive, I would argue, feminists who are trying to because they have ties to young men, trying to find a new framework for taking the men's humanity into account, while at the same time trying to hold on to the feminist principles and values that they advocate for. So they're not pushing back on feminism per se, but they are suggesting, much like the Scott Galloways and the Richard Reeves, they're suggesting that these things, the goal has been overshot, right? The goal has been reached and then some, and now it's time to kind of pull back in a certain kind of way. One could argue that could have taken place, over a decade ago. But that's really what this comes down to, and fundamentally, what it is it's starting to affect their sons. That's the base level reason for this kind of reflection period, this pushing back idea that you're starting to see from the left. Is because it's starting to impact their kids. And this goes for Scott Galloway as well. And I think Richard Reeves talks about his own family in his book, but Galloway, talks about it with his kids. They're observing how this is affecting their kids. So it wasn't really an issue to many of these people until it affected their homes. So there are many that have been talking about this purely on principle. But I'm not mad. If that's what it took to get you into the fray, then that's what it took. But it is important to understand people's motivations, because there may be a future junction where there's a split in the road on how we're going to address a particular issue. And if you don't understand what motivates some of the people that you think are allies, you won't understand the decisions they make. So it's important to understand, are you doing this because this directly affects your household, or are you doing this because you object to, the injustice of the issue on principle? And maybe you go from one to the other. Maybe you progress from this affects my son to this is wrong in general. Hopefully that takes place, but it is good to always understand people's motivations.
Just know after I went on Joe Rogan and talked about male biology and how the evolutionary purpose of aggression and sex drive and all this stuff, I got a lot. It was heartbreaking. I got a lot of feedback from men who were just so thankful that I wasn't stigmatizing them for who they are and how they felt, these drives that so many men have to reckon with, and women don't get. I have no idea why I always
because you're a woman.
Reaction. It's just that this is a part of who they are. A lot of men don't feel uncomfortable at various points in their lives with this incredibly strong urge. And they have to learn sexual urge. Yeah. That it's not, yes, women are horny, right? We're all horny. A lot of us like love sex and want sex. It's not the same for men. It's a sort of desperate hunger often that there's this incredible draw. It's like very difficult for them not to look at women's bodies when they're like wearing these tiny little shirts with no bra. Their nipples are like boing, fine, do what you want, but they're gonna look. And it's hard for men. It's very, very hard not to look. A lot of men like want to be good men and they feel they're failing and they are sensitive. They're not.
And you can see, even as a former Harvard professor, if I'm not incorrect about that, this is not something that she's thought through fully. She's processing it while she's talking. This is because for the most part, this has been what feminists have been pushing for decades. A female first initiative in all aspects of human life that, really doesn't take the male into account at all, because the idea is the male is privileged. All males across race are privileged, across class are privileged simply because they're male. And that's it. So the push for women's advancement was the only focus. And when it began to, impact their own households, they have no idea how to pull that back, because now they're seeing the potential collapse of society, right? Negative birth rates, so on and so forth. They're just now starting to understand how myopic and tunnel vision they've been about their own advancement, to the detriment of the family and relationships in many respects. Not just dating and mating from, dating apps and so on and so forth, but to marriage, reproduction, so on and so forth. That is crumbling. And they're now having to be forced to reconsider. And you can tell they haven't figured out how to do it yet. So I will say, if we use Helen Andrews as an example, women on the right might be a little bit more ahead of women on the left on this matter. But this is just beginning. The other motivation that I've seen women have for reconsidering, these positions has to do with some of the more recent changes that we've seen take place in the job market. The whole question of having a man now for economic support, financial support, rather than just relationship support. I mean, some of the data that I've heard about very recently is that, about 600,000 Black women who have been sidelined, as they say, from the workforce. They use very specific terminology on that. I find interesting, but nonetheless, that's, I think, having a direct impact on some people's reevaluation of relationships. So we're already seeing a pushback from the independent, woman narrative. And now it's shifting into, a couple of different areas. I'm seeing, there are some who are saying, I value relationships, I love and respect men, and I always have. And men are looking at this like, we ain't heard none of that in the last, whatever. But then you also have some, and I mentioned this on Jeff St. James's show, who are saying, well, you know what? I'm tired of working. I need a man to pay these bills. I need a man to come shovel this snow. I need a man to take this garbage out, fix my car. All right, you can have me now. I'm ready. I'm ready to get married. Really, not able to read the room at all in terms of what men have been concerned about, what men have been frustrated about. Their only concern is utility and service to them. Now, relationships are going to include that. It is what it is. It's not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. But when someone is reduced to nothing more than a utility, and you haven't even met them yet, then that's a level of objectivity or objectification, that we can't excuse. That needs to be dealt with. And so I'm seeing women that are crashing into that wall, if you will, at full speed, and having to reconsider, readjust, because life has changed dramatically. And, for many, it might be really too late. I think a lot of men have been withdrawing, for a reason. And it's not like they don't have any other options, but this is where we are. So that said, I just kind of wanted to put some of my thoughts on feminization as it relates to what men are experiencing on the table. This, you can even consider this a part two, if you will, to the show I did a couple of weeks ago about Black men being the canaries in the mine on feminization. We're going forward, and I wanted us to talk to Black men that are going through this. I wanted us to hear about it. I wanted us to kind of examine what's taking place, because at the end of the day, if we don't talk about it, where else are we going to? Right? This is not something you're going to see on CNN, and if you do, based on what we've seen recently, it's not going to be covered with any degree of integrity. Right? Any men's space that talks about these issues, they first and foremost, they'll put it into the category of Joe Rogan, oh goodness, what's the other cat's name? Fresh and Fit, you know what I mean? They'll just put it in those categories. And I don't think they're accurate about that because they don't actually listen to these men. It's not a question of whether you and I agree with everything some of these other men in other spaces are talking about, but how the mainstream interprets these conversations. They take the most extreme reimaginings of it without actually listening to the men talking. And then they brand any of that discussion as one and the same. But if you come into these spaces, whether you call them red pill spaces, manosphere spaces, black manosphere spaces, what you find is a large number of people with a lot of different perspectives, backgrounds, training, experiences, who are weighing in on what we've been experiencing for years, but not necessarily doing so with the same arguments. There's a lot of disagreement. There's a lot of difference. It doesn't always have to be disagreement, but there are a lot of differences. But that kind of detail is not afforded to men when they speak about these issues. And that's mainly because when you don't have the approval of women, it has to be branded as something bad and harmful to her. But even if it's corrective, even if it's what would be useful, right, to fixing the family, it has to be marked as negative. And again, Andrew speaks to that point very directly when she talks about that. If it's not authorized by women, it's not filtered through women's perspectives, it's automatically viewed as alien and therefore negative. And men have just stopped caring. That's really what the fuck it is. Men have stopped caring, right? They're not waiting for approval. They're coming to their own conclusions. And I think for the most part, this is what scares those who are interested in advancing feminization. It's terrifying to them because they don't control the narrative. They don't control the discourse. They control it in the mainstream, but they don't control it at the grassroots level. And men are not waiting on anybody's authorization to give their opinion, whether it's the feminists who are in position or whether it's people like the Scott Galloways and the Richard Reeves. They're not waiting to be authorized and to be excused and ordained or knighted by these particular folks. They're not waiting for that. They're coming to their own conclusions. And this scares the shit out of a lot of people. As far as I'm concerned, I ain't losing any sleep about that. But we're going to continue to talk about these issues. If you have any thoughts, anything we missed, anything you want to add, especially if you have your own experiences, like what we interviewed the three gentlemen earlier in the show about, I want to see those in the comments section. I may reach out to you if there's a future show where we can actually engage your experience. Please feel free to share it. If you don't, I more than understand. But these are the kind of things that I think we really need to talk about so that we can get to the bottom of this and make sure that we at least understand our own position and our own concepts, our own approach to these issues, rather than waiting, for others to tell us what to think. So anyway, that said, appreciate y'all. Y'all have a good night. I'll holler at y'all soon. Peace. I am here to tell you, brothers, we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man-children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, unintelligent henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic, selfish, and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace.